Hello YouTube. I'm here this morning working with my Chevelle. I'm checking out that oil pressure warning light issue that I showed you the last time. With the key on, the light should come on. As you can see, it's always off. So let's check out the engine compartment, see what we can see. When we come out to the engine compartment, this is what I saw the last time. I thought it was pretty funny. I don't know if you can see it there on camera. But the oil pressure switch, I put a plug in it. I think I remember the switch was actually leaking. So I just unplugged it and stuck a pipe thread plug on it so it wouldn't leak. So that's the answer. That's the reason why my light's not working. I'll go ahead and walk through the steps of how you would check it if it wasn't working and you actually did have a sensor hooked up to it. And I'll go ahead and show you how to diagnose that. It's not hard at all. It's actually pretty similar to when I worked on the fuel gauge. Easier, really. Okay, real quick schematic of the oil pressure warning light. It consists of an oil pressure switch that has spring pressure on one side trying to force it to ground and oil pressure on the other side pushing it off of ground. With the engine off, zero oil pressure, the circuit's grounded. It has nothing to oppose it, so the spring pushes it down to ground. With the engine on and actual oil pressure, the circuit's open because oil pressure is pushing the spring off of ground. So that circuit goes from the sensor switch to the wire. It goes to a connector, usually the bulkhead connector at the firewall. It goes to the interior of the vehicle, all the way up the circuit. It goes to the gauge cluster, that's where it hooks up to the oil pressure warning light. Grounding it turns it on, and with it being open, it's off. Right now we have it disconnected, so it's showing an open circuit, which explains why the light is off all the time. So that's a real big explanation on how the oil pressure warning light circuit is supposed to work. I'm going to take it a step further and I'm going to diagnose the circuit as if the oil pressure warning light switch was there, but it just wasn't working. It just never turns on the light. And I'm going to take it a step beyond that, and we're going to actually check oil pressure on the car, and I'll show you how to do that, assuming that we don't know if we have a faulty switch or we just want to know what the oil pressure is. Here's some stuff that I'll be using today. I've got my OTC oil pressure gauge set, which comes with a high pressure gauge, a bunch of fittings, and a low pressure gauge that we'll be using. It also comes with the hose, which has a quick disconnect fitting on one side for the gauge, and the other side screws into the motor. We'll be using some Teflon to seal it. We also have a jumper wire with alligator clips on both sides, a jumper wire with spade terminals on both sides. We've got some wrenches, a ratchet, and a special oil pressure sensor socket. I have my snap-on digital timing light, which I'll be using to watch engine speeds. That way I can take oil pressure readings at different speeds. And I've got some parts that I ordered from Amazon, one of which is the oil pressure switch, which I knew I had to replace anyways, because as soon as I found out I had removed it. So that's why I need the spade terminal connector. I shove the spade into the terminal, the female terminal. I use the jumper wire to hook up to the breaker. And I need a good ground. Use the alternator for that. So with the circuit grounded, we turn on the key and our oil pressure warning light comes on. That tells us that our circuit is good and the light is good. So at this point, all we would have to do would be replace that oil pressure warning light switch. But like I said before, I'm going to take it a step further and I'm actually going to check oil pressure on this car. So at this point, we can remove the electrical jumper completely because we're going to be dealing with the mechanical portion. At this point, I have to remove the plug that I installed in the back of the engine covering the oil pressure port. Here's the plug that was back there, a little pipe thread brass plug. So we hook up our gauge. So with our gauge hooked up, now we'll go ahead and start it up and see what the car does. We're showing about 44 psi at idle. I did forget an important part of the puzzle. We want to know engine RPM, so here's my tack light. That's how you check oil pressure. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the gauge and go ahead and replace the switch now. So here's the oil pressure switch. Like I said, it already has some sealer on the threads. You don't need to add any more sealer. In fact, a lot of times this sealer lets ground go through. If you do add pipe sealer, you're going to prevent it from grounding. Let me try to show you what I did here. You can see the oil pressure switch back there. The HEI distributor is so bulky, the socket wouldn't lay flat on it. But I was able to turn it at an angle and get it to snug up. These switches don't go very tight. I'm just going to snug it up by hand right now, and maybe I'll get a shorter socket and fix that. But for now, I just snugged it up. I'll go ahead and connect the connector, and let's see what we got inside. So these are the oil pressure readings we got. At 730 RPM idle, we got 44 PSI. At 850 RPM, we got 45 PSI. At 1000 RPM, we got 48 PSI, and at 2500 RPM, we got 55 PSI. In case you guys are wondering, the oil pressure warning switch that I used is an AC Delco short number D8050. Like I said, I got that from Amazon. Back inside the car now. We've already replaced the oil pressure warning switch, reconnected the connector. Before that, we verified we do have good oil pressure. Let's turn the key on. The oil pressure warning light comes on because the switch is grounding it. It's telling us there's no oil pressure. Start it up. Oil pressure light goes out. The oil pressure is overcoming the oil pressure switch, keeping it open. That's the way the circuit's supposed to work. Well, that's pretty straightforward repair. I hope you guys found it interesting. Thanks for watching.